ladies and gentlemen, now we're moving straight to our fireside chat, which is on what will be the tipping point for crypto going mainstream. Well, the talking points are about fiat devaluation, tokenization, and long term value investing, and of course, Bitcoin. Well, we have with us our speakers, Anthony Pompliano, the co founder, Morgan Creek Digital. Anthony, effectively known as Pomp, invests capital across the crypto ecosystem on behalf of institutional investors. He also runs Off the Chain, a popular podcast and an email newsletter aimed at educational professional investors on the crypto industry. Morgan Creek Digital assets are backed by the institutional investment house Morgan Creek Capital, which has $1.5 billion in assets under management. The firm launched a digital asset index fund in the late August, which gives accredited investors indirect exposure to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and 8 other large market cap assets, although not pre-minded cryptos such as Ripple and Stellar. Also, our next speaker is Kevin Soltani, the CEO of GIMA Group. Kevin's entrepreneurial journey started after the financial crisis of 2008, where he first sold his first company, listentohouse.com, in 2010. Well, in 2012, his team founded and became one of the first ever Southern Californian business to deliver customized crypto mining hardware software to clients in Orange County through BitRig Builders. They sold the hardware division of BRB, which is BitRig Builders, 3 years later. Well, since then, he's pivoted to merging the traditional and digital worlds via esports and gaming. GIMA Esports Agency and Advisory now has offices in LA, London, and Dubai, servicing the gaming and esports industry while merging blockchain technology into the gaming industry. Well, now it is time to get Kevin and Anthony on your screens. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this fireside chat. We got a big one here. We got a famous personality, not only in the crypto markets, in the Bitcoin industry, or the blockchain, whichever buzzword you want to use for it. But we got an amazing celebrity of sorts here with us today. And I can read his bio online all you can. You guys can read his tweets, which I'm sure everybody does, but I'd love to hear from the man himself. But the general gist of today's topic, we're just going to go over some really high-level stuff, some really interesting topics of what's going on right now, and see if Pomp wants to run for 2024. How about that, huh? So, Pomp, I'll hand it over to you for a bio, but thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, listen, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this, and obviously in the future, hopefully we can all do the conference in person again. From a bio standpoint, I pretty much have spent my entire career either building companies and products or investing in them kind of throughout the technology sector. Was in the military for 6.5 years, built and sold 2 small software companies, ran a number of product and growth teams at both Facebook and Snapchat, and then started investing full-time in 2016. I've invested over $100 million in early stage companies over the last 4 years. And then on top of that, have now built out a fairly large kind of media or digital content business that obviously has got a podcast, a daily letter, a bunch of different kind of products that go into that business as well.
I was muted. I apologize. You mentioned the podcast, right? Which has obviously been taken a life of its own. And not only you've been able to parlay that into a new amazing podcast, which we'll get into a little later, but can we start off this session with the famous Pomp podcast start? Can we get one for our Dubai fans?
It's easy. Just bang, bang.
Just bang, bang. All right. I know they'd appreciate that. So bang, bang. Here we go. My first question is, and I kind of alluded to in the intro, was, with this tweet that went out a few weeks ago, or maybe a week ago from you, it sure does sound that you might be making a future bid into politics. And if not, it sure does sound very good, I must say. Yang and Pierce couldn't and aren't doing it for the Bitcoiners. So can the Pomp be a future running mate? And I'll just say this for our friends out there. The tweet said, want to improve the United States, 1, decrease the size of government. 2, increase individual responsibility. Abolish the death penalty. Decriminalize marijuana. Reframe the preemptive war. Educate young people. Focus on tech. And incentivize scientists. Welcome everyone. Is this the agenda for 2024?
I enjoy my private life.
Hey, that's what Trump said, 92, you know?
Yeah, look, there's obviously a lot of important things that go on in politics, and I think that there's a lot of kind of impact and positive change that can be made through that kind of position in society. For me, I think that one, I enjoy kind of a private life. 2, I tend to think that I can have much more impact and kind of change being a private citizen. So I'll stick to the tweets for now.
Hey, all I can say about the stick to the tweets part and the privacy part is that Trump said the same thing in 92 and again in 208. So, we're encouraged by that. So the next list that you tweeted out was more dedicated toward the youth, it's sort of, obviously. And what I liked about it and what you're doing more recently is that financial literacy in all things non-traditional finance, which is obviously front and center, but it's what's needed in this new decade that's about to come and this new era of finance. And I'll just read it for our friends. Young people need to understand the future, young people understand the future, automation, robotics, electric cars, clean energy, space, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and Bitcoin. Obviously, a lot of those have to do with traditional markets, Bitcoin being the non-traditional one. So in order for these to take legs of their own and to go into this new era of finance, will the old money need to respect what's called the new money? Or is the new money going to have to educate the old money to come into the new? Because that's what it seems like.
I tend to think that this is just kind of natural market cycles playing out, right? You always get kind of a situation where you've got some incumbents, they've done things the same way for years, if not decades. Then all of a sudden you get some sort of challenger. Some of them succeed, some of them don't. The ones that succeed end up creating significant disruption, which leads to innovation. And then you kind of get new incumbents, right? And so if you think back, take an Apple or Microsoft, they used to be the challenger, right? They were literally the hackers that were in a garage or in a small office, and it was them versus the man, right? And kind of the former incumbents. Well, if you're successful as a challenger, you eventually become the man or the incumbent. And so I tend to think that these market cycles just play out over and over and over again. But part of what I was kind of getting at there is usually innovation comes from younger people, right? And that's not to say that kind of older people can't be successful, right? I think the average age of the most successful entrepreneurs when they start the company is like early 40s, right? So kind of building companies experience really helps, right? Having a network, having access to capital, all of that can definitely help. But when it comes to technology innovation, we tend to see a lot of that come from younger people. And some of that's just the naivety of, hey, I'm young, I don't know how I'm supposed to do anything, so I just do it the way that makes sense to me, and that ends up being a different way than previously happened. Some of that is a level of arrogance, right? That hey, we're smarter than the incumbent, and so we're gonna be audacious or ambitious enough to go do something. But also, I think that there's a demographic or societal difference as well, right? So if you take kind of digital natives, they grew up with a cell phone in their hand, right? That one kind of action completely changes the way they see the world to an older demographic that just didn't grow up with that technology. And so I tend to think that young people is a great place to kind of keep an eye on what are the technologies that they're interested in, what are the things in their mind that are foregone conclusions, right? If you were to talk to a young person today, electric cars and kind of these automated fleets of cars, it's not a question of, is that going to happen? It's like, of course it's going to happen. If you go and maybe talk to some older folks, like that's a world that might be harder for them to see. And so I think that that's kind of a really good place for idea generation is just go talk to young people, right? And ask them, what are they excited about? What are the areas that they think are ripe for disruption? And you'll probably have a pretty good shot at kind of getting ahead of some of these trends.
Do you think like with electric cars, so in California, the governor or whoever just announced by 2030, I believe, or 35, all cars need to be electric. So that's giving a buffer of 10 to 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 35. So that's a pretty large amount of time to switch over, right? Obama did cars for cash where you could get change in your clunker. And now we don't have any 1970 cars. That was a good initiative. It worked immediately. But something like this, do you feel like for crypto, Bitcoin, and the money in the banking system, the traditional versus non-traditional, will we have to do something like this? Like announce, hey, by 2032, we will be changing. So whether you like it, don't like it, understand it or not, we will be changing over. Or do you feel like that might be too harsh of an educational process?
Yeah, look, I tend to think that like all of that political mandate stuff is all just pandering to an audience. And frankly, it's campaigning, right? You've got a governor who just picks a random date 15 years from now and says it's mandated by this time. In all likelihood, the market is going to adopt electric vehicles way before that 15-year period. And so it sounds great in 2020, especially if you're a politician looking to be reelected and things like that. But generally, I do not think the government does a good job of kind of forcing innovation. There's some things they can do around incentivizing innovation, whether, especially through like fiscal policies and things like that. But in terms of mandates, very rarely are you going to kind of, force somebody to become more innovative and disruptive. Now, one of the things that is interesting is California happens to also be the home of Tesla, which kind of kicked off a lot of this innovation. It was a real inflection point in terms of electric vehicles. And so, there's kind of a debate there as to, well, it was already happening in that state. Was there some sort of government incentive for that to happen? Probably not, actually, right? High taxes, all kinds of regulatory complexity, et cetera. And so what you end up getting is, like, at the end of the day, the innovation is just going to come from great entrepreneurs. And so in my opinion, it's just empower the entrepreneurs to build things that end up making the world better in some way, right? And whether that's in a specific technology, a specific sector, going after a specific demographic of people, whatever it is, just empower the entrepreneurs, because ultimately entrepreneurs are just problem solvers, right? And if you look at the United States of America, we were built on innovation. That innovation was driven by capitalistic entrepreneurs, and that incentive system continues to be the superior way to build economies and societies. And until we have a better system, pretty much we know all the other systems are inferior. Let's stick with the best one we got, right?
Yeah, no, you're spot on in saying the politics of it all, right? There's no going around that. Everything these days seems to run into the wall of politics, whether it be an extension of a deadline, a new, type of fiscal policy or anything in between. But I don't know if you remember this. Of course you would, but the first draft of the bill that got accepted, a few months ago in America, and for our international friends out there, I'm sure you heard of it. We had a massive bailout or 10 in our country over the last 6 months, and they're going to keep coming, and we need them to keep coming. They're going to the wrong places, but that's for another topic. But for the purposes of crypto markets, digital assets, I'm sure you remember the Democrats tried to put in that digital dollar into the bill that would have essentially paid everybody's $1,200 in this first digital currency. Now, that would have been a massive expediment of the process, right? That would have it's like what we just said. That would have, whether you liked it or not, grandma, here's your $1,200 in this new digital token that is a stable coin, one for one, what was supposed to be to the dollar. How do you feel about that? Do you like that idea? Do you feel like it should have been pushed through? Too early, too late?
Yeah, so I think there's two separate issues here. First is, should there be a digital dollar? And then two, kind of how do we implement it and who's the one who built it and things like that. When it comes to should there be a digital dollar, I think almost 2 years ago now, probably in 2018, I was on CNBC and I pretty explicitly said, look, the United States needs to act immediately to create a digital dollar because if not, we're going to fall behind, right? This whole idea of whoever is the first global superpower that is able to digitize their currency and make it accessible to anyone in the world is going to have a significant advantage when it comes to accessibility and adoption. And so you can imagine a world where if it becomes easier to get, let's say, the RMB or a digital yen or digital euro or whatever, anywhere in the world, you're going to change the adoption curve for those currencies. And that would put the US dollar's global reserve status at risk. And so the way to kind of get ahead of that or prevent that is for the U.S. to digitize their dollar before anyone else digitizes their currency. As I would have expected, nobody really cared, right? There's a couple of politicians on Capitol Hill or whatever who kind of said, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but nothing's really kind of moved forward. Fast forward to the stimulus package. Again, I don't think that kind of government mandate via these like stimulus packages where, hey, we're going to hold back the aid that we want to give people until the digital dollar is created. The government's going to take years to build this thing, right? And so that leads to like, well, maybe we shouldn't have the government build it. Maybe we should actually have it built by private corporations and in some sort of competitive process, put it out for bid and really run a streamlined process so that we can get the best technologists in the world to go ahead and do this. To me, it feels like we're kind of going back into this bureaucratic, ineffective process of, oh, the government's going to build technology. And I always tell people, like, you name one technology that the government created and runs daily, right, that did not come from the military, and you tell me that it's good. And so it's just, sure, are there things that the military created and then private enterprise kind of took it and ran with it and really commercialized it? Of course. But there are very few technologies that our government or any government around the world, right? It's just a function of the bureaucracy covering their asses, right? The kind of access to so much capital, right? Literally innovation is suffocated by access to too much capital inside of a government. And so I think it's just like, yes, we need this. It needs to happen sooner rather than later, but I do not think that the government itself should build it. It should be built by private enterprise on a contract basis and some sort of competitive process.
Well, mate, you just said it best right now. Isn't it funny how I was just closing my eyes and ears for a second, and all I could replace is the word Fed and take us back 40, 50, 60 years. And I'm sure the same conversation was being said about how the heck do you introduce this new system? Right? We need to do it from the outside. We need to do it from a private company. It can't be us that does it because then they'll think otherwise. It can't be us because we're not good at managing stuff. We're just good at finishing off wars. This was when the Fed was being introduced, right? So now fast forward 50 some years, 40 some years, and we're having the same exact conversation, and I'm sure they are, but now you got governments that are beating us to the punch, at least on the technology side, right? And for our Dubai friends out there, I don't have to tell you what you've been seeing out of Abu Dhabi. Yes, it's been taking a long time. Yes, it's going to take a lot longer. But look, this is one of the fastest growing nations in human history was the UAE. And Dubai and Abu Dhabi came out of nowhere with these financial systems with the help of the West. And they're also at the forefront of the innovation. So I don't know how much you know about like Dubai 2020, which was initiated. And then Abu Dhabi's central bank is in talks with the Saudi government to be able to do some type of dual currency for the first time. There's a lot of talks in this region that are getting hotter and hotter. I know that's a lot of people say, but we're excited that this region at least is participating and is announcing different things to see to come. Have you heard anything from the Middle East, the MENA region, that you can share with us, or saying that it's encouraging stuff to come?
Look, I think that everyone understands whether it's payment technologies, whether it's the underlying technology of our currencies, there's just a lot that is left to be desired. Some of that is because we've got bad political policies. Some of that is just bad kind of central bank policies. And some of that, frankly, is just outdated technology, right? And I think that what you're going to see is, as with every technology, you'll continue to see kind of an evolution and an improvement. The question is, kind of which countries go first? What are the incentive mechanisms that kind of drive that innovation? And also, I think it's a lot of leadership as well, right? It's when you have leadership that makes innovation and kind of acceleration of technology a priority, it tends to be that nations and that countries' entrepreneurs follow. When you don't have that as a focus, you kind of get just whatever you're going to get. And so I think that that's one of the things that leaders around the world can do is really drive and incentivize innovation and the acceleration of technology within their borders. I wish there was more doing it, but we'll kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'm sure you heard about this. The UAE is a really good supporter of all things innovation, if not the best, ironically, in the last decade or two. And with the young population, I think it's just a matter of innovating entrepreneurs, right? So taking a page from the West and running with it. There's some great crypto projects, but most of them have to do with payments, as you can imagine, and the region for obvious reasons, because the largest population of Indians live in the UAE rather than any other diverse population. So that, and money gets transferred back and forth a lot. Philippines being a big thing. So you can imagine payment is a big thing. We're already on the topic, but you kind of mentioned it about central banks. My question here was, what does it look like? What does it have to take for an entire overhaul of the system itself, other than the obvious Western countries and the obvious Eastern countries that are doing it? Is it a matter of no one wants to be first to fold or pivot, or is it bigger than that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of issues, right? The first is we obviously are in a kind of structure at this point that is very unsustainable. And so if you look at something as simple as we broke from the gold standard in 1971, if you denominate, let's say, the stock market in dollars, it's straight, 45-degree angle up to the right. And that has very little to do with the stocks actually becoming more valuable. It's with the devaluation of the dollar. And because if you take that same stock market and you then denominate it in gold, for example, the stock market is actually down since 1971. And so if you kind of play with the denominator, then all of a sudden it doesn't look so pretty. And so I think, and obviously if you do it with like Bitcoin, it's down a lot. And so I think that's kind of the first thing is we've got to remember that literally the system is structured in a way where cash is being devalued, and we are driving a wealth inequality gap. They're right. That wealth inequality gap is a feature of the system, not a bug. Now, a lot of people are looking and saying, okay, well, that's just kind of how the system is structured. Maybe we can, kind of there's good positive outcomes from that system. And so what I always look at is things like the debt to GDP ratio, right? And so recently I was, talking publicly about this, but if you look over every fiscal year since 2009, right? So we're now talking over a decade. Every single year, the U.S. government has taken in a record level of tax income. So every single year we've taken in more and more tax income, and it's set a new record each year for, now going on 11 years. But the annual deficit that we run continues to get bigger and bigger. So when you look at that, you say, wait a second, we don't have an income problem. We have a spending problem, because no matter how much money we take in, we keep spending at a faster rate. And so that's kind of the first problem. Then you get into the second problem being, okay, well, let's look at our debt to GDP ratio. And so if you go ahead and you go back over the last 50 years or so, the average debt to GDP ratio in the United States was about 3%. The most in recent years was 9.8%, which happened in 2009. So kind of think of 3% as the average, 9.8 was the worst that we had seen in recent history. The fiscal 2020 year just ended, and we ended with more than 15%. So almost double the worst debt to GDP ratio on record in a fiscal year, at least in recent times. And so when you start to look at this, you say, wait a second, well, let's go around the world and compare that. And so an example of like Venezuela is running a 28, 29% debt to GDP ratio. They used to run 3 or 4%. And so what happens is as you start printing lots and lots of money, like we've seen over the last decade, and you start to manipulate your interest rates, you end up just stacking up all this debt. Now, what we do know is, and I forget the exact threshold, but I think it's like either over 100% debt to GDP, kind of total, or maybe it's like 115%, whatever it is. But at some threshold of 100% or higher, 51 of 52 countries who have gotten to that point have eventually defaulted. And so I think that where we kind of are headed is like, we're just making the same mistakes that we've seen happen over and over and over and over again. And the problem is that the incentives are to stay on the train, right? To not get off, because we're as an economy, we're just addicted to the stimulus. And so what I ultimately believe is going to happen in the short term is we're going to continue with all the monetary stimulus. It'll become less effective over time. There will eventually become this focus on fiscal policy where can we lower taxes? Can we increase government spending? Well, when we do that, we're actually going to increase the debt load on the United States. And it's just going to kind of be this reinforcing situation where ultimately like the United States ends up in a really, really bad place. But that is how, again, cycles happen. right? We went from the challenger to now we're the incumbent, and eventually the incumbents get disrupted. And so I don't want to see that happen, right? I'm kind of yelling and screaming about it because I'd like to kind of wake people up and see if we can reverse this or at least stop the bleeding. But as we know, it's just unlikely that anything is going to change. And so that then leads people to say, well, what is the alternative option, right? And, from all the work that I've done, Bitcoin is the most attractive alternative option. And so that's why I've chosen to put a considerable amount of my net worth in that kind of digital currency.
From everything, at least in the West, and by West, we mean Europe and more West, it's obvious to know that it's all attached to politics, man. You said it a few times. We've said it a few times. Everybody say it. It always comes back to politics and policy. So if policy doesn't change, if politics wants to keep remaining dirty and continue the socialist way of that seems to be taking over the West and all of the West, what can we do, right? There's really, it's kind of a no answer question. What do you call it? A rhetorical question, but it's like, what can you possibly do, right? If there's zero support, zero fiscal policies, zero policies, period, then what do we do? We're already at 132% with Italy, right? We're already at 115.5% with Spain. So we're talking major Western countries that I just announced in the West that they're going to be falling any second now, just like in 2008 with Greece and the islands there. So I guess it's rhetorical, but if you have anything to say about it, like, what do we do, right? It always comes back to politics. Whether we have a good president that's super Bitcoin friendly or like Obama, which was very against the even traditional way of doing things, and not to blame anybody, but you got to look at what happened to where we came. And your example of the 2008-9 percentages till now, well, those don't lie. The money is in the numbers. The numbers are in the numbers, right? So rhetorical or not, like, does it always come back to politics? Whether it's China, whether it's Venezuela, or here in America, it somehow means that we just got to have a president and a team that's really willing to overhaul the system, like you said.
Yeah, I think that what we're going to ultimately end up seeing is, kind of a bifurcated system. There are some people who are going to sit around and they're going to wait on politicians to solve the problem and come up with those solutions. And then you're going to see people who kind of take the individual responsibility and say, I can't wait for the politicians. I need to solve this for myself. I think the first group is going to end up being pretty disappointed, right? Because when you start to unpack a lot of this, Federal Reserve's not there to kind of save you. They're not there to make sure that you have food on your table. In fact, they're there to quote unquote manage an economy. And in order to manage that economy, they end up playing winners and losers, or picking winners and losers. And so that's great if you're a winner. That's really bad if you're one of the losers. And so then I think on top of that, you look at the politicians that are elected. Most of them, frankly, don't care, right? And not because they don't care about people. I think most of them do join kind of politics as a way to kind of make a difference. But we've got a political structure that completely misaligns incentives, right? I mean, if you just look at who's running for president in the United States right now, we have two people who are senior citizens, right? And yeah, sure, there's some experience that you could potentially, kind of benefit from by being older. But again, when you look at it, it's actually just a continued kind of elongation of the status quo, right? It's protectionism. And when you look at this, frankly, the first debate, you just look at it and you say, what is going on here, right? How is this possible that we are we put our two best candidates forward, and it's just a joke, right? And so I think that when you start to really unpack a lot of this, there's some things that can be done from a political structure standpoint that could completely change the way that kind of the incentive structure works. And so something as simple as just term limits, right? The fact that we've got people who have spent 40 plus years in politics, right? And what have they done? Right. And you just start to look at it and you say, why are we having, again, people who don't know how to work their iPhone are the ones making decisions around technology or what's going to happen for a future generation. And it just ends up being this like very kind of repeatable problem, because it's not a US thing, right? This happens all over the world. And so what I think hopefully will happen is we can get young people excited about kind of improving the world they live in. We can get technologists working to build things that help to kind of remove the need or reliance on humans. And, you know, at the end of the day, an individual can only make so much contribution or impact. But I do think it's important to kind of incentivize that, or you know, really kind of inspire people to be part of that change. And so we'll see what goes on. But that's all if you want to play, you know, kind of as, hey, the government's going to solve my problem. I tell people all the time, you know, educate yourself and make sure that you're looking out for yourself, because no one's going to look out for you like you do. And so you got to get educated. That's the great equalizer in the world. And I think that most people who get educated on the economic situation realize this is headed to a place I don't want to go. I got to opt out. And something like Bitcoin provides a great opportunity to do that.
You know, the funny thing about Bitcoin, from day one, it's always been a choice, right? You had to make the choice to go mine it or purchase it if you came in late. You had to make a choice to learn what this crazy fake internet magic money is. You had to have taken the risk to buy this crazy internet magic money, and you'd have to have taken the risk to hold it over time. And so all of those were choices. All of everything about Bitcoin and crypto's early days, and even till now, let's be honest, is a choice. You're choosing to diversify. You're choosing to create a different financial system of security for yourself that's not just backed by the traditional system. So what Pomp just said to us, everybody, is you got to make your own decisions. You know, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, no one's going to come save you. Doesn't matter America, this president, that fiscal policy or not, is that this Bitcoin, this community was built by choice. This community grew by way of choice because more people chose to join it and more people are choosing to expand on it. So, you know, right into the last few questions, we're going to just bang them out. Obviously, everybody's going burr right now. All the printers are going burr all around the world, right? That's just a funny meme that came out, but it's so true, right? It's all you ever hear if you're near one of those factories, right? That's just going to go burr, burr, burr. What does this mean to you? What does burr mean to you?
Look, they're going to continue to print. The economy is addicted to stimulus, right? That there's no way around that. And so I think at this point, you know, back in March, literally there's tweets out there that I said, we're going to need $5 trillion before we get done with this. And people thought that was crazy, right? I wrote a piece in the letter where I said, we're going to see unemployment levels that were worse than the Great Recession or the Great Depression. Again, people were like, you're insane, right? And so what I basically explained is, no, people constantly underestimate the economic damage that is occurring. And so it's kind of like the Bill Gates quote, like we underestimate what's possible in 1 year we overestimate what's possible in 1 year and we underestimate what's possible in 10 years. Right. The same thing in the economy is we constantly overestimate the health of the economy, right, and we underestimate the stimulus and the kind of manipulation that's going to be needed in order to improve it. And so, you know, there's some people who will sit by and get hurt by all this, and there's some people who are going to benefit. And my entire thing is understand what they have to do. They don't have a choice. They have to print more money, right? They have to manipulate the interest rates. And then once they get done with all the monetary stimulus and it becomes a less effective tool, they're going to start playing around with the fiscal policy. And so if you can understand all of that, there's a very, very simple way to protect yourself. And it's just to opt out of all of that exposure. And so that's what I've chosen to do. And I think more and more people you're starting to see, even if it's the Paul Tudor Joneses of the world, who kind of choose small allocations as almost a hedge, all the way on up to you know, very successful kind of macroeconomic traders and stuff who are choosing to go very high double-digit percentages into something like Bitcoin.
The typical thing from the beginning has been, well, why should billionaires join? The billionaires, right? The top teners. And ironically, none of them have joined. None of the top teners. Jack kind of goes up and down the list, but you know, Zuck has said some stuff. But is it not oxymoronic for someone brand new, not guys like us, but for someone brand new who just found out what Bitcoin is today? He's got some money, he's educated, and now he's excited about this. But he says, hey, the market cap is just X billion. I could get me and my buddies and we could just totally take this over, disrupt it with a couple algos, and we would essentially wouldn't need any fiscal policy. Is that not true of billionaires being able to just come in and really make a splash if they wanted to?
I think there's way more billionaires who own Bitcoin than the public knows about. That's all I'll say.
And I think you're spot on. And I think our friends in Dubai are chuckling right now because a lot of them are saying, hey, I got a man. I know that guy because, knock on wood, Dubai is a very wealthy place. I've been there long enough to know it worked hard to get there. It spread the money out the right way. They had money, right? It spread money out the right way. And the citizens are happy and everybody's happy for it. We're going to just go through a couple questions, get your thoughts on some stuff. Long answer, short answer, whatever you like. Or in the case of that one, a lot more than we'll have to say and I can say. Kraken and the banking system, is that the first step to what we can look forward to or not on the right path?
I think it's exactly what we're going to continue to see. I don't see the banking laws changing in the United States. And so a lot of these crypto companies are going to have to, kind of eventually go down this path. And so it's cool that Kraken not only was the first one, but I know there's a couple of others that have filed their applications. One that we're an investor in, Avanti, run by Caitlin Long. And so I think you'll see more and more kind of approvals in the coming months and years.
But you agree that's the path that it takes, right? Exactly the path that's being taken. More and more should take. And by the time we get, 20, 30, 40 banks, now we're on to something.
I think if you want to operate in the United States, that's the path you're going to have to take. Obviously, other countries have different, laws and regulations. But in the United States, if you want to do this is what you're going to have to do, I think.
Will this give confidence to the other countries to want to take a faster step? Or some are already doing it anyway? Will they kind of look at our model or are we kind of looking at their model?
Yeah, I tend to think the United States ends up being the leader, whether they realize it or not. It's kind of this beacon of capitalism, innovation, and kind of, superior economic environment. Whether that's true or not is a whole other thing at this point, but I definitely think the U.S. is seen as the leader, and so people look to them to kind of get guidance.
With this pandemic, we've seen an explosion of non-traditional assets, which is the digital assets that we're involved in this industry, but also non-traditional assets that are becoming more popular, like in gaming, like in esports, and the tokenization of those are really exciting. I don't know if you know this about Fortnite, the game, but they sell a V-Bucks token, essentially. It's a fake dollar, but that sells billions of dollars a year on their market. They don't call it a token. They won't trade on any exchange. But in the future, as gamers, we all know that many of these coins and digital assets are coming. Do you feel like these tokenizations of and these digital assets for are a good way for adoption? And will it take a life of its own because there's so much options with the tokenization in and of itself with NFTs and what could be done?
I think every stock, bond, currency, and commodity is eventually going to be digitized or tokenized. Where it happens, which ones come first, what countries embrace it versus fight it, all that's up for debate. But I think the kind of finish line here for sure is that every stock, bond, currency, and commodity will be digitized or tokenized over time.
And do you think that the West, obviously, I say the West as in, the Western culture, but America, that's obviously going to take a lot longer. Look, I get it. We tried 4 years ago to tokenize a whole building in New York City where you're at, right? Mr. Wonderful 2 years ago got in that same type of deal. Mark Cuban's been in a couple of them, and Houston, tokenization of larger assets for the commercial markets. But when we're talking about maybe, buying stocks and shares of different companies and tokenizing those securities, I think that we'll see that come quicker than before. But the last question, and it kind of ties into this tokenization of if everything's going to be tokenized, if everything's going the way of the NFT sort of say to be broken down, what does a world look like if it's not fully Bitcoin crypto powered city economy yet, but we have a failing dollar, failing currency all over the world, but we're still stuck between this rock and a hard place? So what would you suggest people do as not an advisor, a financial advisor, but as someone that's looking to get all into Bitcoin or listens to your words and says, you know what, I'm going to do what he says, 50% of my net worth. But now we're stuck in this post-economy world of really crappy fiats and not a really adopted world of crypto.
Yeah, I tend to think that you're going to get coexistence for a long time, right? Is you're going to see the kind of crypto world continue to be the challenger and kind of punch upwards at the traditional world. You're going to see the traditional world try to fight innovation and those challengers to kind of punch down. You know, the truth of the matter is that most financial advisors in the United States, they're just trying to keep their clients, right? And so what are they doing? They're telling them all these things about, you know, Bitcoin's bad. That's where illegal transactions happen and, you know, all this crazy stuff. But it's all self-serving, right? They are literally just standing on the road and they're going to get run over, right? And they're going to look like fools because it's not what my opinion is. It's not what your opinion is. Like, it doesn't matter. It's what the market believes. And what we have seen is the market is adopting this technology at a breakneck pace. And that's only going to continue. It's a network effect business. When you look at these things, like, there is no doubt in my mind that we are going to see Bitcoin eclipse the gold market cap at some point. And so when you think about that, it's like, okay, well, how long does that take, right? Is that a 5-year exercise? Is that a 10-year exercise? Is that a 20-year exercise? But if that's going to happen, it's going to be one of the greatest wealth generation events in history. Is you're going to have something that literally goes from pennies in value to something that is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was available to anybody in the world with an internet connection, right? That is a completely different mechanism than what we've previously seen in terms of, you know, kind of money managers or insiders being able to access something, but the public not. And so I think that it's kind of, you know, at this point, just a little comical. Like, yes, there will be coexistence, but this idea that, like, oh, this Bitcoin thing or this crypto thing is here now, but it's going to go away. I think it's pretty naive of people ignorant or frankly just arrogant. And so let the market decide. The market's the ultimate referee, but I like our chances.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to end it on a high note that Bitcoin will, at some point in its history of exercise, being any type of its exercise, will overtake the gold market cap because it's essentially the official old versus new. And it's officially going to be the newest asset class that will be for the millennials or for the Gen Zers coming up and beyond. I think I learned a lot from what I haven't read on your tweets. And so in the very beginning, when you said go to the tweets, maybe, you know, refer to this and all of his other previous recordings. I think that what's to come is really exciting. I think that we don't make predictions here in our company. I've never heard you make a prediction in yours. I've never heard anybody make a prediction because and I'll leave you with this, agree or disagree, it's never a bad time to buy Bitcoin. It's never a bad, and I think actually, who said that? That's not like, what's his name said that? Anyway, I'm mistaken, but a very famous Bitcoiner said that. He said, it's never a bad time to buy Bitcoin. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think that it's, you know, I'm always careful to make sure that people understand, like, there's risk, right? Bitcoin could disappear. It's very unlikely,
right?
Like very, very unlikely, but there's always risk in this stuff. And so again, it goes back to, it doesn't matter what I think, you think, anybody else thinks. Like, go do your own research, get educated, understand what's going on within the macroeconomic environment, understand how Bitcoin works, why it's valuable, what, you know, how market adoption of previous technologies has worked, you know, study money, do all these things. And I don't know anyone who's gone and done all that work and has walked away from it saying, yeah, Bitcoin's stupid. Right. The people who've done the work end up coming out of it saying, like, wow, this is really, really interesting. Right. And then it comes into just, how do you enter a position, right? And if you think of it as a trade, that's one thing. If you think of it as that's going to be your reserve asset for you personally or for your business, that's another thing. But still, you've got to get in and out, or the real Bitcoiners will just get into Bitcoin and then hold it, you know, in perpetuity. It's just a matter of, don't go and do something stupid, right? Like, be intelligent, dollar cost average, like, do all the things that we know are kind of sound financial principles, and you'll be fine. And so I think that that's kind of where we are now, is people are realizing, like, this is, kind of where the world's headed, and to the people who do the work and have the courage to act and have the conviction to act, the market will ultimately reward those who are right.
I'll leave you with this, and I'll leave our audience with this. Neither is your dollar, and how large is your cash position? You remember that one? That was on the Buffett one, or I think the next one. But that was like, that's what I would say. People tell me calm down, this and that, and what I'm going to say like it's real. And I tell people, so is your dollar. How large is your cash position? So. Pomp, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being on with us. I think a lot of our friends out there in Dubai, around the world, will appreciate this. Thanks, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this, Kevin, and have a great rest of the conference.
I will. Thank you, brother. I'll talk to you soon.